Bueno, estamos en uno de los lugares más exóticos de Austin. Estamos en Cela Ranch.
Banburger background.
He started Church's Fried Chicken.
He started Church's Fried Chicken. It's a businessman.
Businessman. He grew up very poor in Ohio and read a book when he was about 15 years old about a man that had brought some degraded farmland back to health. And Mr. Banburger thought that was such a wonderful story. And he said if he ever grew up and made a lot of money, he wanted to see if he could do the same thing. And so he came to Texas as a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman. And then befriended, selling vacuum cleaners, befriended the man that inherited Church's Chicken from his father. And the two of them together started Church's Chicken.
And made it an international.
And then he had the money. So when Mr. Banburger had millions of dollars, he didn't go to Paris and buy a Learjet and have fancy clothes. He bought a piece of land that nobody wanted, that was in terrible shape, and fixed it, river basin. I think you, in your ecology, you want your trees. You want you want a lot of trees, and here at the Banburger Ranch and around San Antonio and Austin, we have to think historically of what this part of Texas looked like 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 500 years ago, and what it was predominantly a grassland. A grassland. Now, as you go back to San Antonio and you look out your windows, you see a lot of trees, a lot of evergreens. And this tree is native to Texas. It is part of our natural ecosystem. But when you go back to San Antonio and you see forests of it, that is not how Texas was when early settlers came, when the early Spanish settlers came to Texas. It was mostly a grassland with oak trees here and there, wildflowers, a big diversity of trees, but mostly a grassland. And that is very, very important to understand for our water and where we get our water from. Have you been in San Antonio long enough to have heard that word that's so important about water in San Antonio, where the water comes from? You've been here during a terrible drought, and so you've probably heard them say the Edwards Aquifer.
Yeah.
The aquifer's low, everybody has water restrictions. When Mr. Banburger bought this ranch in 1969, 40 years ago, this ranch, where you're standing right now, was a solid forest of this kind of tree. It was so thick that if Julia had parked the cars right here, you would not have been able to get up and walk through the trees. The trees would have been so tightly together that you'd have to get down on the ground and crawl. Now, what did he do? What did Mr. Banburger do? He cut down a lot of them. Cut down a lot of trees.
Why?
Because he knew historically, when Mother Nature was in control, this was a grassland.
Okay.
And there were two reasons why in a short period of time, so 200 years ago we know that this was a grassland.
Yeah.
Well, today we know it's mostly forest. What happened in that 200 years? Two things. One, wildfires were very, very, very important. When early settlers came here, lightning strikes in their yard, starts burning up their grass. What do? You put it out. So the suppression of wildfires was the most important reason. Grasses need fire. The second was cattle. And early settlers came to Texas and they saw grasses as tall as the belly of their horses. 7 feet tall, 6 feet tall, 5 feet tall grasses.
Wow.
As tall as all of you. If we had landed here 200 years ago, the grass would be over your heads.
Wow.
Now, if you are a settler, what do you think?
Good food for the cow.
Good food for the cow. You think, wow, I'm going to bring all my cows. And there was a grazer that came through here naturally. Does anybody know what the big animal was that ate all the grass?
El
Or
búfalo.
the buffalo. The buffalo came. But did the buffalo stay
Bison.
in Texas?
Bisonte.
The buffalo roamed all over North America. They roamed up to Montana, Minnesota, Kansas, Oklahoma, down to Texas. Here in South America are doing better than us as Americans, as far as your children and your young people being exposed and still having a connection to the land. We're trying to reconnect kids that are generations away, separated from the land. And so in many regards, the South American, Latin American, African countries are all doing much better than us, because we've kind of forgotten in our rat race.
Voy a hacer algo bien rápido porque quiero que ustedes también aprendan a medida que la señorita explique. El señor Banburger, que es de origen alemán, que vivía anteriormente en Ohio, compró en 1969 2.500 hectáreas de terreno. En aquella época juniper o este tipo de conífera existía por todos lados. Entonces lo que él hizo fue cortar, pero no todo, solo algunas cosas para que el hábitat del medio ambiente aquí se pudiera mantener a un nivel normal. Porque esto depende pájaros, depende de mamíferos, mamíferos y otras cosas. Entonces dejó algunas especies y cortó otras especies. Con eso vino otra vez el agua de los arroyos, el agua que anteriormente no pudo, ya no existía. También empezó a salir los pastos y otros árboles. Vino animales, las mariposas empezaron otra vez a volver a este rancho. Entonces todas las personas, los ranchos de los alrededores, querían saber por qué el señor Banburger era muy successful.
Muy exitoso.
Sí, ¿por qué el señor Banburger era más exitoso? Porque él ha hecho algunos trabajos aquí en su rancho. Entonces venían a visitarle para ver qué es lo que él hacía y empezaron a copiarle. Entonces eso es lo que a grandes rasgos él ha hecho. No realizó otras cosas, pero empezó a trabajar en su suelo, a hacer trabajo de mejoramiento de hábitat, de trabajos naturales y de conservación. Entonces, muchas cosas nosotros en Sudamérica, en Centroamérica y en África estamos viviendo mejor porque podemos ver el
cielo,
las estrellas,
la luna.
podemos ver muchas cosas todavía. Y los niños de Austin y los niños de San Antonio a veces no tienen esa oportunidad de ir un poco más para entender y ver la naturaleza. No saben o no ven qué es lo que queda más en las afueras del cemento, del asfalto y de los rascacielos.
The origins of him,
Yeah.
es muy interesante.
Ajá.
Era pobre.
Sí.
Era pobre, es cierto, era pobre y vivía en Ohio, dice, y a los 15 años él leyó un libro que le hizo pensar, y que cuando grande quería ser como él. Después se mudó a Texas y empezó a vender casa por casa vacuum cleaner, como el limpiador de... Aspiradora, gracias. Aspiradora. Entonces se hizo de dinero, conoció al anterior dueño de esta empresa que después él compró, y así empezó él a hacer dinero, a juntar dinero, y compró este terreno de 2.500 hectáreas, que es conocido internacionalmente por las actividades de medio ambiente y de conservación que ha hecho en el...
America, the Endangered Species Act was signed into law in 1974, and Mr. Banburger put this in 1975, because Texas has a history of landowners and environmentalists fighting with each other, and so he did this to make people think. And so in 2 million it's the gravestone to the human race. It would be the cemetery to the human species. And Mr. Banburger in 1975 listed 3 ways that the human species were destroying the planet Earth and thereby destroying our existence. Wastes, that's our trash, that's how we deal with pollution and poisons and chemicals, so wastes, even wasting resources, wasting water, cutting down trees for too much paper. And then poisons, that would be oil spills, chemicals, air pollution, gasoline, you name it. But the most important one is the last one, is numbers, and that would reference the human population on the planet Earth. So scientists say there are about 7 billion people on the planet right now. And we don't think that we're changing our behavior fast enough on the other two to match the population growth. We're still not smart about how we throw away things, how we recycle, how we use we're not smart about chemicals and poisons and fertilizers. And so this is just something to get people thinking.